Welcome everybody, and thank you guys so much for coming to my presentation on ultraviolet fluorescence discovered in New World flying squirrels. My name is Allie Kohler, and I just want to start real quick by thanking Northland College and Texas A&M University for making this project possible. So what is fluorescence? Now some people may be more familiar with bioluminescence, which is when a living creature simply creates and emits its own light, like fireflies or bioluminescent algae. But fluorescence is different in that it happens when something absorbs a shorter wavelength, which is UV, and then reflects or emits it in a longer wavelength, which is visible light. So UV wavelengths are actually invisible to the human eye. But with a black light, which I should have brought for a demo, but a black light can be used like a translator, and that actually allows humans to see UV in the visible spectrum through the process of fluorescence, which is how the pictures of these flowers are taken here. Now, biological fluorescence has been documented in a wide range of life, from plants, scorpions, amphibians, reptiles, a handful of birds, and even a couple of marsupials like Didelphidae, which are the possums. And now flying squirrels can be added to that list as well. But all of these creatures use the fluorescence for a different reason, some of them for a mating display and others for camouflage. But today, this is about flying squirrels, and I wanted to share with you guys where you can find them. So there are 3 species of North American flying squirrels. The northern flying squirrel is in the north, mainly in Canada, and the southern flying squirrel is on the eastern half of the U.S., and the Humboldt flying squirrel is in a little cluster on the west coast. And now, if you see the bolded lines on the map, those areas show the regions where we had samples from in this particular study. So basically, you can see these nocturnal critters running around your backyard anywhere from Alaska all the way down to Honduras. So how did this project begin? It happened when one of my professors at Northland College, now he's a forestry professor, so they're a little crazy, he was running around his backyard in the middle of the night with a black light in his hands, looking at different plants and mosses and lichens that fluoresce under UV. And it just so happened that a flying squirrel came right through the beam of the flashlight, and he came to school the next day and said, "You guys, there's bright pink flying squirrels in my backyard." And of course, nobody believed him. But once we got some photo, video evidence, everybody's heads were turned. This is not altered. This is just holding up a black light at this flying squirrel. So to investigate, a small team formed at Northland College consisting of myself and 3 of my awesome professors. And we began by going to the Science Museum of Minnesota and then to the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History to expand our sample size. So we looked at 109 flying squirrels, and we also looked at 26 other individuals of 3 different species to represent the control group. And those were red squirrels, gray squirrels, and fox squirrels. And we also had 5 additional observations of living wild flying squirrels that were made during co-occurring but unrelated projects in the field that we just added to the sample as well. We used a Canon EOS 50D camera to photograph every single specimen under natural light, which is just like a light bulb in a room. And then we did that again under 395 nanometers UV light using one of the handheld flashlights. And these were some of the pictures that we obtained. So as you can see, the dorsal surface that's fluorescing on this flying squirrel is really vibrant. This is one of our most vibrant pictures. But for the most part, almost all the individuals had little to no fluorescence on their dorsal surface, and it was almost entirely underneath them. So for that reason, we focused the majority of this project just looking at their underside. So we divided every individual into 4 different ventral body regions, and those were the head and neck, the body, the tail, and the patagia, which are the membranes used for gliding. So each of the 4 observers ranked each of the ventral body regions from 0 being no fluorescence to 5 being very high fluorescence. And we also estimated the percent cover of fluorescence for each of the different 4 ventral body regions. And it turns out that all 3 species of North American flying squirrel did fluoresce under ultraviolet light, this pink color, to some intensity or another, and not one of the control squirrels fluoresced this pink color at all. On the left, you can see the diagram that shows the mean fluorescence scores for each of the ventral body regions, and it shows that the head and neck were the least vibrant, and the body was the most vibrant. And on the right is the percent cover, which shows that the head and neck were the least covered in terms of surface area, and the tail was the most covered in fluorescence. So as you can see, some individuals were more vibrant than others, and some were more covered in fluorescence. We used some general linear models to explore patterns of this fluorescence, but we weren't able to find any significant correlations. We looked at the relationship of fluorescence to sex, species, age, season of collection, and latitude of collection, but we weren't able to find none of these factors could explain the fluorescence that we were seeing. So at this point, it seems to be super random, but of course it's possible that with more data, some trends may start to appear. So why is this happening? What does it mean? And is it ecologically significant? As of right now, we don't know yet, but we can speculate. So once we expanded our sample outside of Bayfield County, Wisconsin, we could conclude that this was not the result of a handful of flying squirrels living next to a fluorescent paint factory, which is what we thought initially. But it is possible that this is the result of some exogenous factor, like consumption of fluorescent lichen, and it may not be significant to the squirrels at all. However, it seems unlikely that some environmental factor would span such species and seasons and decades and countries and habitat types, and also that it would show such interesting patterns. So for that reason, we are suggesting that this is an intrinsic trait, and perhaps it's ecologically significant. So we came up with 4 different hypotheses to explain this phenomena, although they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. The first is that it could relate to the flying squirrel's unique crepuscular nocturnal light environment. Glaucomes is the only New World squirrel that is active during twilight, which just so happens to be the one time of night that is most proportionately abundant in UV wavelengths compared to any other time of day or night. In addition to that, flying squirrels actually have transparent eye lenses, which are capable of transmitting UV light, where all the diurnal squirrels filter UV. So now this gets a little tricky to understand. I even have a hard time comprehending it, but whether the flying squirrels' brains are processing that information, the UV that passes through their eye lenses, is a completely different question. So we have no idea if or how the squirrels are seeing their own fluorescence. And for that matter, we don't know if their predator or prey are seeing the fluorescence either. But it is possible that the squirrels or their predator or their prey are not seeing it as a vibrant pink color like we are, but perhaps they're seeing it as something dark or even black. Now picture this. How interesting would that be if the flying squirrels are using the UV on their underside to essentially cloak their lighter surface and make them blend in the nighttime, so that they're less easily spotted as they glide from tree to tree. So it's possible that they're using the UV to help themselves navigate or to blend in the nighttime. Now our second hypothesis relates to snow cover, which is present throughout most of Glaucomes' range. They do not hibernate, so they're active year-round and they're running around through the snow. And even though the total amount of sunlight decreases during the winter, the amount of UVB radiation increases and perhaps even doubles in winter compared to the summertime. In addition, the snow reflects UV, which could be a further indicator to how significant this UV may be to the squirrels in this winter setting. And the third hypothesis relates to interspecific communication. So the squirrels could be communicating with each other and signaling to one another as they glide from tree to tree, exposing their potentially brighter undersurface and then concealing it as they latch onto trees or curl up in a nest at night. And this could also be a form of mate display, like some birds, for example. But we are leaning away from that a little bit simply because, as of right now, it's both the males and females that fluoresce about the same. And our last hypothesis relates to the fact that it could be an anti-predator trait. There are many owls, like this one here, that are the squirrel's predators that also have the same trait. So, the fact that the flying squirrels live in the same areas and are active during the same times of night and have the same pink colors and the same general patterns on their body as the owls is very intriguing. This could be a form of Batesian mimicry, where the squirrels are trying to disguise themselves to look like the owls to avoid predation. And they could also simply trying to avoid predation by blending into their ultraviolet saturated environments. Because as I mentioned before, a lot of plants and mosses and lichens fluoresce, so there's some fish that blend into corals that fluoresce, so they could just be trying to avoid predation in that way as well. This is discovery science. It's one of the first mammals ever discovered to fluoresce under ultraviolet light, and it shows just how much is hiding right in front of us, sometimes in our own backyards. The more that we can learn about this species, the more that we can understand them and help conserve them and potentially apply this information to a wide variety of other species in the future. And there are also some potential human benefits that could come out of this as well, perhaps related to the biomedical field, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. So the point is, who knows what implications this research could have in the future. But in the end, I just hope that this allows people to take just a moment out of our crazy busy days and simply pause and wonder and awe at the natural world around us. And I also hope that it opens people's eyes to how much there is still waiting to be discovered. And sometimes all it takes is looking at things in a slightly different light. Thank you. Do you have a minute? Okay,
Time for
any
questions.
Yes, sir.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
The idea that it may be something that the owl wouldn't explain why it's mostly on the other side.
Right. You definitely have a point, and we're just kind of throwing ideas out there at this point. So that's why it may be more leaning towards maybe their prey see it as a darker color because they might be looking up at them. But just
Right? What do they eat?
they eat a lot of different things, but I don't want to go too far into it because we have no idea. That's why we're just kind of throwing these things out there. But the point with the owls is that the owls do it, and they think it's for a mating display. The males will circle about the females. So whether the owls can see that or not, I don't know. But just they're mimicking potentially how the owls look. So, yes.
They're mimicking the owls. It could be a display towards other flying squirrels who might be afraid of an owl attacking them in the rug. And therefore, so my question for you is, do individuals interact in the trees? Do they dive bomb each other?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do not know the answer to that. I'm not too sure about their behavior. I've worked with flying squirrels for a few years now, and I had not seen that before, but we're not really out there at night too much. We live trap them throughout the night, so I don't know. That's definitely a possibility. Yes?
Owls prey on weasels, and it could be it's a way to mimic owls. So the flying squirrels mimic the owls and discourage the weasels.
That's another, there's so many things that this could be. That's definitely another one, yes.
I was wondering if you had looked at maybe other tissues in the museum samples that you're looking at?
We have not done any sort of chemical analyses. And interesting point, actually, the fox squirrels have been discovered to fluoresce in their bones and their fossils. So, but we didn't see any of that on their pellets. So everything is kind of open at this point.